those days, slipping in the driveway, almost hitting the pole, going up, go back.
Yeah, back it up so you can run it.
Considerations around Project 2025, around January 6th, and the speech that she gave last week in Washington, D.C. to try to allude to that.
We know who Donald Trump is. He is the person who stood at this very spot nearly 4 years ago and sent an armed mob to the United States.
I mean, for the Harris campaign, it's very pro-democracy. For the Trump campaign, I think it's maybe a little bit worried, but his message is always about national identity being at stake. You know, he had this phrase he said on January 6th, 2021 about how
You don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
it's very similar to some language that Andrew Johnson used in the years after the Civil War. So it's this sort of recurring thing in American politics to talk about the stakes of what's going on and to kind of have a racial element to that.
You got to get these people back where they came from. You have no choice. You're going to lose your culture, you're going to lose your country.
And I do think that some of it gets lost in the way that the Democrats frame the stakes of this election is to talk about Trump as being unprecedented. And there are some elements of that that are unprecedented, but there are also some elements that have a lot of deep continuity turnout does go up, when people care about the difference between the two candidates and perceive that difference to be meaningful, there's this sort of misconception that elections that are kind of hard fought turn off voters. And actually what we've seen is, compared with like the late 90s and early 2000s, when I was kind of aging into the electorate, voter turnout was quite low. And I always tell my students, I was in college in 2000, I couldn't get my roommates to vote. They were just uninterested in the difference between Bush v. Gore. They could not see these two candidates as having compelling differences.
Neither did Rage Against the Machine. They made a whole music video about it.
Exactly.
We'll be prosperous if we embrace free trade. Prosperity, fair trade.
We think of that as being now like a simpler time, and a time when people were using this most important election of our lives much less. As we got more into these more existential elections, so like really the Bush era, 2004, 2008, 2012 even, and then of course this whole Trump era, voter turnout has gone up. I mean, it hasn't climbed steadily or in a super clear pattern, but for sure, like, people are way more engaged. And that's what happens when people care about the difference between the two candidates.
Harris is selling this argument that this is the most important election of our lifetimes, based on the idea that Donald Trump wants to fundamentally alter our democracy. He was president once, and yes, that whole era ended in an insurrection, but did he fundamentally alter our democracy that go round?
I actually think so. The most obvious one is that the peaceful transfer of power is this sort of really critical element of democracy that simply did not happen. There's just no way to spin it in 2021. Not just January 6th, but all of the legal stuff that went into it, the legal jockeying that went into it.
The election was totally rigged. It's a disgrace to our country. It's like a third-world country, but I think the case.
Looking for loopholes in the law that allow you to do what you want, even if it doesn't necessarily serve public purposes. I think that Trump decisively lost the popular vote and governed very much as if he had decisively won the popular vote. I think there were a lot of evidence of using the office for private purposes.
Record share by the House Oversight Committee showed Trump hotels and properties charged Secret Service agents 5 times the normal government rate for accommodations while protecting him. Expenses covered by the taxpayer.
So I think that there was real change to American democracy in, I think, really key and important ways.
We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think that it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
The argument from the right as to why this is the most important election in the history of the republic is that if you don't vote for Donald Trump, Kamala Harris is going to fundamentally change this country. Is there any credence to that argument?
It's very unlikely that Kamala Harris as president would fundamentally change this country. I would mostly look to Obama and Biden for guidance as to what kind of politician Harris will be. And then if Harris wins, we will think of this as a historic election. We'll think of this as the first woman president. And then, very similar to Obama as the first African-American president, we'll then see governance that doesn't really match the level of revolutionariness of the election result. We'll see governance that very much reflects, a complicated democratic coalition. We'll see governance that I think will reflect a changed Democratic Party that has shifted to the left and consolidated on abortion, has shifted to the left on economics in some ways, but also a party where there are a lot of Democrats in swing districts who are very, very cautious in their rhetoric about the police. I think we'll see somebody like Liz Cheney or another Republican in her cabinet playing a role, probably not setting key policy, but playing a role.
I think it will be to the benefit of the American public to have a member of my cabinet who was a Republican.
I cannot imagine that it would fundamentally change American democracy as far as the policies that she would pursue and the coalition that she would lead.
You're kind of saying that Harris pretty much promises more of the same, which might be the fundamental reason that people vote against her.
It might. It might.
We spoke to the history professor early in the show. We're speaking to the political scientist now. Both of you seem exhausted by this pitch from candidates that, the most important election ever. Yeah, give me a break. When it actually comes, will we know it?
been one long campaign since June 2015. I was sort of looking through some of the news articles about how common it is to say it's the most important election. And I came away with the conclusion that maybe it is just because elections are really important. I don't want to be cynical about that claim. I actually want to sort of give credence to the idea that every election maybe is the most important.
Julia Azari leads the Civic Dialogues program at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She's also written for Vox.com. We here at Vox will try to answer all your questions about the results on tomorrow's edition of Today Explained. But if we don't get to any, there's always the new Explain It To Me podcast. Give them a call with any election-related questions you may have at 1-800-618-8545. Again, 1-800-618-8545. Or you can email a voice memo to askvox@vox.com. Vox's Avishai Artsy produced our show today. He was edited by Amina Al-Sadi, fact-checked by Laura Gold, and mixed by Patrick Boyd and Andrea Christensdotter. Have a great one.
Today Explained is supported by Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/today.
Stay with CPR News for all the important election news as it breaks. As polls close and vote totals roll in, you'll hear live coverage and context from NPR and CPR News beginning this evening at 5, lasting through the night and into Wednesday morning. Listen here on CPR News and on your smart speaker, and come to CPR.org for more results and reporting.
This is CPR News, 89.5 FM KPRM Grand Junction, 88.3 FM KPRH Montrose, and 88.3 FM KPYR Pro. On translators in Gunnison, K210BS 89.9 FM, Ray, K218BE, Parachute, K203FJ, Rangeland, K216BO, and Meeker, K216BP, and online at CPR.org.
Support comes from the Colorado Symphony, presenting A Colorado Christmas, December 13th through 15th at your concert hall. Carols and winter tunes with the orchestra, choruses, and special guests. ColoradoSymphony.org.
Welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. I'm Paul Henley. In the US, voting continues in a knife-edge presidential election. Donald Trump casting his vote in Florida is typically upbeat.
I feel very confident. We went in with a very big lead today, and it looks like Republicans have shown up in force.
The Democratic candidate Kamala Harris took to radio airwaves today to urge people in swing states to vote. How will her message be received in Wisconsin, where James Kumarasamy is for NewsHour? I've been speaking to voters in one closely contested county just north of the city of Milwaukee. Also on the program in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu fires his defense minister. What implications will it have for the wars in Gaza and Lebanon? And we'll hear about a new EU songbook aimed at strengthening cross-border ties. All after this news.
Hello, I'm Roisin Osteen with the BBC News. Voting is in full swing in the United States for a presidential election that's on a knife edge. The results will either see Kamala Harris become the first female president of the world's most powerful country, or a political comeback for Donald Donald Trump. For Virginia, here's Ryan Bridge.
There have been long lines of voters outside polling stations, particularly in some of the key states which could decide the outcome of the election. Both parties know turnout will be crucial, with both contenders using their final campaign messages to stress the importance of every vote. In some states, officials have boosted security, wary of how people may react to the results. In several places, the National Guards are on standby in case of unrest. Tensions high in a deeply divided nation, which is making a critical decision about its future.
Casting his ballots in Florida, Donald Trump said he was confident of victory, but he again aired unfounded fears about the ballot counting process. Speaking to reporters in the swing states of Pennsylvania, Kamala Harris's running mate symbols praised the robustness of America's electoral system. Whoever wins the White House may have their hands tied by Congress, which will be formed after votes also taking place today. About a third of the seats are being contested in the Senate, where Democrats are trying to keep their small majority. In the House, all 435 seats are being fought for, and in this case, it's the Republicans who hope to hang on. Many polls suggest both chambers could flip the other way. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has sacked the country's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, who cited a breakdown in trust, which he said was vital for wartime unity. The BBC's correspondent in Jerusalem is John Johnson.
We've known for some time that there have been tensions between Yoav Gallant and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but those tensions have clearly come to a head. In a statement, Mr. Netanyahu said that there had been differences in strategy in the wars in Gaza and in Lebanon. Mr. Gallant is thought to have been pushing to end the war in Gaza for several months in order to try and secure a ceasefire and hostage release deal. That is not something Mr. Netanyahu agrees with, and we know now that he will be replaced by the current foreign minister, Israel Katz.
Large crowds are gathering in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem to protest against Mr. Gallant's sacking. The opposition leader Yair Lapid called it an act of madness. World News from the BBC.
This is CPR News and KRCC. I'm Mike Lang. A conservative activist in Colorado is the person who found the hidden passwords tag to many of the state's voting machines on the Secretary of State website. CPR's Nina Brooklyn reports he sat on that finding for months.
According to an affidavit, Sean Smith says he found the tag first on August 8th and confirmed it was still there October 16th and October 23rd. The state discovered it after a voting machine vendor notified them. Here's Democratic Secretary of State Janet Griswold.
It's incredibly concerning that individuals information is analyzed.
The state says the election system is secure because access to the machines requires someone to be there in person in addition to the password. In Benta Brooklyn, CPR News.
Colorado Springs has released the results of a study of concert noise at the new Ford Amphitheater. CPR's Dan Boyce reports neighbors have complained since the venue opened this past summer.
Sound levels from 3 shows in October showed the amphitheater did meet the noise requirements set forth in the project's development plan. Yet, city staff say they understand the concerts have nevertheless been disruptive and are committed to further lowering the noise. The amphitheater's owners have already promised to further sound dampening measures, including building an out-facing restaurant to thicken the sound wall facing the closest homes. Dan Boyce, CPR News.
The Front Range could see its first real snow of this season as early as tonight and tomorrow. As overnight temperatures drop into the 20s, Denver is activating its temporary cold weather shelters. The shelters will be open today through Thursday. Denver opens the shelters when nighttime temperatures reach 25 degrees. There is snow for the mountains today, highs around Vail in the 30s, and rain and snow for Grand Junction. It's Election Day, and our special election coverage begins at 5 o'clock this afternoon. Polls close across Colorado at 7. This is CPR News and KRCC.
withdraw mid-race of President Biden in favor of Kamala Harris. The winner is expected to be decided by the results in 7 swing states. This is what Donald Trump said to journalists after he voted in Florida.
I feel very confident. I have, we went in with a very big lead today. And it looks like Republicans have shown up in force. So we'll see how it turns out, but it seems that they have really shown up in force.
Kamala Harris has been speaking to the radio station KDKA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, key swing states. The Vice President urged people to go out and vote. Asked about Donald Trump's campaign claim that she had broken the U.S. immigration system, she said that there had been a way to fix the border issue, but Donald Trump had decided against it.
Congress and the United States Senate, some of the most conservative members came up with a bill, which I supported, to put more resources into putting more agents at the border, more resources into combating human trafficking, and sadly, my opponent told them to kill it, to not do it, because he wants to run on the problems and fix the problems.
The News Hour's James Kumarasamy is in Wisconsin, a key election swing state in what's known as the U.S. Rust Belt, northwest of Chicago. He joins us now. Jamie.
Yes, Paul, thanks very much. Hello from Cedarburg. It's a lovely old mill town. It's a bit of an overcast afternoon, I have to say, here. I'm in Ozaukee County. It's one of the counties just north of Milwaukee, the biggest city in this state, which is being very closely watched, these 3 counties, because they are counties which have traditionally been Republican, but they've been trending towards the Democrats. And just to give you one example, here in Cedarburg, 63% of people voted for the Republican in 2012, 55% in 2016. That was Donald Trump, of course. And last time, 4 years ago, Joe Biden won this town by 19 votes. It is very close here. Wisconsin, always very close, but the last 2 elections, just by 0.7% they've been decided. First to Donald Trump, then to Joe Biden. So people are wondering what is going to happen here now. And I've been out to a few polling stations during the course of the day. I have to say, a lot of people voted early here. Maybe 2/3 have voted early by post or in person, which will be interesting when it comes to the timing of the counting of the votes. But people were turning up today, and I went to the town hall here in Cedarburg to hear from some of the voters.
My name is Mike. This is my mother, Marianne. I am a blue patriot, if that makes any sense. I could not bring myself to vote for Donald Trump.
So it's not policies, it's the man.
Yeah, it's him.
Maybe I can ask your mother. How did you vote now?
For the right person. I'll say that.
Not the same way as your son?
Yeah. Trump was, I think he's going to say it. Let's put it that way.
Well, what I do is I focus on policy. I'm not selecting a president, either one, to be my spiritual leader. I have someone that does that. So for me, it's policy.
So which policies were important for you?
I think economic policy and more accountability in how we spend our money. It sounds extremely unnecessarily wasteful that that money could have been used in much more positive ways.
So it's policies, not people, but it would be you person who is President of the United States after this election. How did you see that choice?
Are you asking me how I voted?
I am asking you how you voted, so yes.
I voted for Donald Trump. I have some concerns about what I'll call leadership style. He makes some comments that I just go, really?
But you still think he's the best person for the job?
Without any doubt. To me, it's not even close.
I think the economy is a big thing for me. I really feel that when you have such high gas prices, it really drives the price of everything up. So I do think the economy is a big thing for me.
So you felt that, have you personally? You felt the impact of that?
Definitely. In the middle of a bathroom remodel, and I wish I had done it several years back because the price of everything, the materials and the workmen and everything has really gone up significantly.
Does it come down to that, do you think? Do you think this election will be decided on the economy?
You know, I don't know. I think they're really pushing abortion. That's a really big issue for some people. And as a woman, I guess it's strange. It's just not a really big issue for me. I pray that the Lord knows what he's doing. I pray that he's going to protect us.
Well, look, nice to talk to you. Something like yourself on name, perhaps? Could I ask you how you vote?
Straight Republican.
Are you always straight Republican kind of guy?
Yes.
And important for you that Donald Trump becomes president again?
Yes.
Why? What's the most important?
Because of the alternative.
What would that mean if Kamala Harris wins, do you think?
Well, she doesn't know what's going on half the time. She's incompetent, I think. So she doesn't deserve that.
I'm nervous.
Are you?
About my fellow Americans, our
Constitution and our democracy.
And you think what, one of the candidates
Do I?
is a threat to that?
Yes, I do. I think Mr. Trump ought to be in jail. Who cares what I think in London? But that's what I think.
Some voters there in Wisconsin. Jamie, what needs to happen to declare a winner? It's a fairly long process potentially, isn't it?
Yes, potentially. In states like this, especially where it's likely to be a tight race, it could take some time. I was here 4 years ago in Pennsylvania. We had to wait till the Saturday for it to be declared. As I said, what complicates things is the propensity now to vote early, and some states have rules where you can actually send in a postal vote. In Nevada, you can send in a postal vote today and it's counted as long as it arrives on November the 9th. But places like Wisconsin, they're starting to tabulate the postal votes and the early in-person votes this morning, but they still don't think they'll get a result. Perhaps the early hours of the morning is the most hopeful. 4 years ago here in Wisconsin, it was the middle of the day the following day, so that's a sort of guide perhaps.
And because of the huge geographical spread of votes, it's a long voting process too, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, the polls close earliest on the east coast and move across to the west coast. We're sort of somewhere in the middle, but look out for states like Georgia. I think that's the first of the swing states, the key 7 or so states where it looks pretty close in all the opinion polls to declare. They might get results fairly early there, it would appear. But again, as I say, the early results sometimes do not reflect the overall result because those early voting papers take longer to process, and that's when you get this delay. So, we will see, but we will be giving you all the information about this. We've got a special program here on the BBC World Service called America Decides. It begins from 17 hours Eastern Standard Time in the United States, 10 p.m. in London. We'll be bringing you all the results, and it promises to be an interesting one.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much, James Kumarasamy in Wisconsin. Now, there's growing alarm among some election experts at the growing volume of misinformation and false charges of fraud being levelled at the Democrats by Donald Trump and his supporters. Sowing doubt about the integrity of the election is a repeat of Mr. Trump's 2020 playbook, and he has flatly and without evidence called the Democrats a bunch of cheats. His key ally, Elon Musk, has been a big purveyor of such conspiracies on his social media platform, X. How widely are the claims believed by Republican supporters? Barbara McCade is a former federal prosecutor in eastern Michigan and the author of a book about disinformation called Attack from Within.
It's difficult to assess how widely believed they are. There are reports that a third of all Republican voters believe that the election is rigged. I don't know whether that number is accurate, because I think that in addition to people who truly believe that election fraud occurs, I think there are others who are sort of willing to go along with the con because they prefer the agenda that it advances. But certainly there are some people who do believe these false claims.
Do some of the claims come with any credible evidence?
No, there's no credible evidence of any of these claims. In the 2020 election, there were false claims of election fraud. There were audits, there were lawsuits, there were court hearings, and none of them held up. And now we are preemptively seeing these kinds of claims about the election being stolen and cheats and other kinds of things. I really think that we have a candidate in Donald Trump and some of his supporters who are really just laying the groundwork so that if he loses this election, they will be able to have sensitized people that there's an explanation for it and that the election was stolen or rigged in some way.
What other results could these claims have? Could they lead to violence?
Of course, I think as we saw in 2020, when people believe that an election has been stolen and when people egg them on, I think it could lead to political violence. When people lose faith in political institutions, I think there are some who will take the law into their own hands. As we saw, there 1,500 people have been charged criminally with storming our U.S. Capitol on January 6th of 2021. I hope that this time our officials are better prepared to deal with something like that. But I think that there will be those, I hope it's isolated, but who decide to take the law into their own hands. And so I think it's very dangerous to traffic in this kind of disinformation.
Is it dangerous even to talk about the possibility of violence? Some Republicans will say you are scaremongering.
Well, I think that we have to be prepared for every eventual outcome. So to say that there's a possibility of political violence, I think it would be naive to suggest that that's not the case after what we saw in 2020. I think that we need to not scaremonger lest we discourage people from showing up at the polls. And I think that law enforcement at the federal and state level are prepared to protect people who go to the polling places to make sure people are not threatened or harassed or that they see any violence when they go to the polls. So I'm hopeful that things will be safe at the polls, but I do worry that if there's somebody out there who doesn't like the outcome and who is told that it was the result of cheating or fraud, I worry that there could be someone out there who is unstable and decides to take the law into their own hands.
There are Democrats online, aren't there, who suggest, baselessly as well, that Republicans are cheats. They're not policed either.
Well, I don't know that I have seen those claims with the same propensity that I've seen claims of Donald Trump and his supporters. But no matter who makes a false claim online about the election of an outcome, it is destabilizing to democracy. And this is certainly something our hostile foreign adversaries are pumping into this election. False claims that elections don't work, that they're not fair, that elections can't run smoothly, that democracy is a failed form of government. And then we have people who are willing to bolster those claims to advance their own personal agendas and really acting as the useful idiots of Russia, Iran, and other foreign nations.
We're very close now to the first results being declared. How do you expect the Trump camp to react when the first swing state doesn't fall their way?
Well, we have seen the playbook before in 2020, and we have heard his advisor, Steve Bannon, to try to suggest that Trump should declare victory even if it doesn't appear that way, and to suggest that he has information others don't have, and that this is just a wave, and we were winning and then suddenly we were losing. So I'm sure there will be some false narrative that comes out of it. But regardless, I think that voters need to be patient and wait until all the votes are counted, because we will see waves that are blue and red as various parts of each state are counted.
That was Barbara McCade, former federal prosecutor in eastern Michigan and author of a book about disinformation called Attack from Within. We'll be returning to the US elections a bit later on in the programme. You're listening to the BBC World Service live from London. This is NewsHour.
Allocating an end-of-year budget surplus is the perfect time to try new ways to connect with an audience. If you have unallocated marketing funds that have to be spent before the end of the year, consider investing them in a sponsorship campaign with CPR. Put us to work for you with an effective on-air schedule and surround your unique message with credible content. Learn about sponsoring at cpr.org/sponsorship.
Support comes from Active Minds, offering community-based adult educational programs for the love of learning. Topics include world affairs, history, biographies, and music. Learn more about programs and locations at activeminds.com. Support comes from Safeway Pharmacy, offering immunizations for flu and COVID-19 this season, helping people stay healthy and keep the community safer. Learn more at safeway.com or on the Safeway app.
I'm Paul Henley with NewsHour live from the BBC. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has sacked his country's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, citing a breakdown in trust, which he said was vital for wartime unity.
The breach of trust between myself and the Defense Minister has become public, and this breach prevents the campaign from being managed properly. It's not just me who's saying this. Most government ministers and cabinet members, nearly everyone, share the feeling that we cannot continue in this way. In light of this, I decided today to end the term of the Defence Minister.
Well, there have already been crowds of demonstrators in Tel Aviv protesting against the sacking. Our correspondent in Jerusalem, John Donaldson, joins us live from there. John, there is no love lost between these two men, is there?
No, and it hasn't been for some time. We've heard over the past year there have been reports of shouting matches between the two men over Israel's
war strategy in Gaza in particular. Mr. Gallant was very much behind the war when it started just over a year ago, but in recent months he has said the government should be prioritising a hostage release deal with Hamas ahead of continuing the war. And of course that's something that Mr. Netanyahu has rejected. So you're right to say no love lost, and that has clearly come to a head today.
Yoav Gallant was often described as a moderate to explain his difference of opinions with the Prime Minister, but he was a strong supporter of the war, wasn't he?
He was, and all these things are relative. He has been pretty hawkish over the past year about the war in Gaza, but his replacement, Israel Katz, is perhaps even more hawkish, and he clearly had strong differences of opinion with Mr. Netanyahu, not just over the war in Gaza, but also the issue of the exemption of Israel's ultra-Orthodox citizens from serving in the military. That is something that he thought shouldn't continue. He'd fallen out with Mr. Netanyahu over that, saying that, you know, the ultra-Orthodox at the time of war in Gaza and also now in Lebanon, they should be serving like everyone else.
Who is protesting in Tel Aviv and why?
Well, the opposition parties in Israel have called for protests this evening, but a lot of those protests are being driven by the Hostage Families Forum, who are very concerned, they say, over the sacking of Mr. Gallant. They have asked that Israel Katz, the new defense minister, should prioritise that hostage deal, something they feel that Mr. Netanyahu has not been doing. So they have been driving those protests. We've had protests also outside the Prime Minister's office here in Jerusalem, not huge, but they certainly got out on the streets pretty quickly after the news came out. So it is going to be interesting to see how those develop over the coming days. I mean, you cannot ignore also the timing of this. Mr. Gallant had a much better relationship with the White House than the Prime Minister's relationship, which, to be honest, is pretty frosty at best. And the timing of this on the day of the US election, I think, can't be ignored.
And in a sentence or two, will this shore up this move Benjamin Netanyahu's support in the country?
Look, I think it's not going to lead to a change of strategy in Gaza or in Lebanon, and Mr. Netanyahu's currently riding pretty high in the polls, and he clearly thought this was a good time to do it.
That was John Donaldson in Tel Aviv, no, in Jerusalem, I beg your pardon. Many thanks. A European Union songbook is launched today, taking in songs selected to give cultural definition to 27 member countries. It is the brainchild of a Danish organisation, which has also translated all 164 songs into singable English language versions. I've been speaking to the founder of the European Union Songbook Association, Jeppe Marsling.
I think for like 70 years we've exchanged more physical things in the European Union. And when it comes to culture, we have the language barriers, which kind of keeps us in a compartmentalized way of living. So we do know the famous songs from like Italy or France or a few from Germany, but when it comes to the wider European Union, the South, the East, I think very few people actually know each other's culture very well.
So who adjudicated which songs would make it into this songbook, and what were the criteria?
We invited the music conservatories, music teacher unions and choir unions to nominate songs. Ordinary people would then choose the final 6 songs for each member state. So it was a very large venture involving 400 media and 87,000 people. But it was all worth it.
So the songs that made it, some are pretty well known. There's a bit of Edith Piaf representing France here.
Most Europeans would probably know maybe 20, 30 songs out of the 164. And these would be like European classics like Guten Abend, Gute Nacht, Brahms' Lullaby from Germany, or Bella Ciao from Italy. beyond that, you realize that very big populations like the Polish people or the Czech people or the Romanians, they also have very deep music culture, and very few people actually outside those countries know of any songs. I can mention, for example, To Jasmine, which is a love song that is played for all weddings and flowers. And this almost 200 years old song is about a man who comes to visit a girl called Jasmine. The parents are very nervous that he will kidnap her, but he says, I only came to take care of the jasmine bush in the garden. But if you think about Eastern European countries, many of them were occupied for 45 years by the Soviets. And it's really a privilege to be able to share these feelings with them.
And despite Brexit, there's even a song from the UK, isn't there?
Yes, there was a musical amputation physically for us, but we kept all inside because this song is a song of friendship, and we hope, of course, the Brits will rejoin the European Union down the line.
It's an old cliche, isn't it, coming together through music. Do you think it's true?
All the songs in the EU songbook, they appear in 25 original languages and in singable English. And it means that we really get into the feelings and the meaning of these songs. In the last 10 years, we have traveled around Europe and collected the notes and talked about how to recruit the best translators. And every time you talk about the songs, you get a very direct, heart-to-heart contact with people that you never met. And we call it European English because it is English spoken as a second language. We foremost want to meet each other through this language.
That was Jeppe Marsling from Denmark, from the European Union Songbook Association. You're listening to NewsHour here on the BBC World Service, live from London.
Distribution of the BBC NewsHour in the U.S. is supported by Midi Health, committed to providing a supportive path to symptom relief for women experiencing perimenopause and menopause, offering personalized virtual care. Learn more at joinmidi.com. And Seed. Seed's DSO1 is a 24-strain 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic, engineered to survive digestion, support healthy regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/health.
Count on the newsrooms and reporters of KRCC and CPR News for coverage and context about Colorado's vote. All the important election news as it breaks here on the radio and online at krcc.org and cpr.org.
There are simply moments you need calm to clear the noise of the day. Night music helps you do just that. And now you can access it night or day. Hear night music at cprclassical.org.
Support comes from Downtown Grand Junction, presenting the annual downtown tree lighting. Santa will oversee the festivities at 4th and Main from 5 to 7 p.m. November 23rd. Tree lighting details at downtownGJ.org.
With the BBC News, I'm Roisin Hasty. Tens of millions of Americans are voting in a presidential election that's on a knife edge. There have been queues at polling stations nationwide. Tens of millions of early and postal ballots were cast, and a high turnout has been predicted. If the contest is very close, it could be days before the result is clear. Whoever wins the White House may have their hands tied by Congress, which would assume a new look after votes also taking place today. In the Senate, the Democrats hope to keep their slim majority. In the House, the Republicans hope to hang on. Both chambers may, however, flip the other way. Fake bomb threats have caused disruption to the voting process in the swing state of Georgia. 2 polling sites were briefly evacuated but soon reopened. The FBI and state officials have blamed Russia on the basis of the email addresses used for the hoaxes. Israel's Prime Minister has sacked his Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Benjamin Netanyahu said growing policy rifts between the two men had undermined national security. Our Jerusalem correspondent says Mr. Grant is thought to have been pressing for an end to the war in Gaza with a hostage deal, but Mr. Netanyahu rejected this. The WHO says more than 100 patients are to be transferred out of the Gaza Strip on Wednesday as Israel's offensive continues. They include children with trauma injuries and severe illness. 12,000 seriously injured or ill patients await evacuation. A French court has jailed 18 people convicted of forming a gang to smuggle migrants to England aboard small boats. The Bajoon's ringleader, an Iraqi
He's over here hanging out like he doesn't want to go inside.
A court in Malmo in Sweden has sentenced a far-right activist to 4 months in prison after he burned copies of the Quran at 2 demonstrations. Rasmus Paludan was convicted of inciting ethnic hatred. BBC News.
Welcome back to NewsHour. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has announced $11 billion worth of aid and reconstruction measures for Valencia and other areas hit by massive flash floods a week ago. Everyone affected will be able to claim tens of thousands of dollars in assistance for repairing damaged homes and replacing belongings.
Sabemos en todo caso desde el gobierno. We know that this is not enough, that there are still missing people who need to be found.
Did you cook those?
Destroyed homes and businesses buried under the mud.
Just that small.
And many people were suffering severe shortages. And that is why we have to continue working without distractions. We went up there, remember that? With more resources, with more coordination, and with greater effort.
The disaster killed at least 217 people. Dozens of others are still unaccounted for. Our Europe correspondent Bethany Bell has this report from Valencia.
I'm in a park near the Victoria River in Valencia, in front of an ever-growing mound of debris.
I wanted to come to
Bulldozers
kind of a
and
cruise,
pickup trucks
do a hostage deal with
the contents of people's
so they fired
homes.
him.
Oh yeah, they killed him in church.
Mattresses, fridges, ovens, all destroyed, ruined in the mud and water.
There was water in houses, people that don't have where to stay.
Close by, I met Kautal, a student covered in mud. She's one of thousands of volunteers helping to clean up people's homes. She told me it's difficult work.
It's so sad, horrible. Like you see people crying, people that lost their homes, some people that lost family. They need some help because it's not normal to wake up and find that your neighbors are dead.
Thousands of soldiers, police and emergency workers are here as part of what Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has called the biggest peacetime deployment in his country's history. Jorge is from the Spanish Marines.
The catastrophe is big.
What are you doing?
Only cleaner.
Businesses have been hit hard too. Motor, a small company which sells cleaning products online, has its warehouse in Picaña, one of the worst affected areas close to Valencia. Its press officer Diego Navarro Rodriguez says they've lost almost all their stock.
First, we need to get the mud out of the warehouse. From there, see how we can recover and how the central Spanish government and aid agencies are responding. At the moment, nothing much is getting through.
It will take weeks, if not months, before the extent of the damage is clear. Diego, another volunteer, says he's been helping in Paiporta, where dozens of people died.
People that live there are very grateful that we go help them. They need help, our help, so they are very grateful, yeah.
That was Bethany Bell reporting from Valencia on the east coast of Spain. I'm Paul Henley, and this is NewsHour from the BBC World Service. Israel's war in Lebanon with the Iranian-backed Hezbollah is expanding. Bekaa Valley, the militant group's heartland in the east of the country, is coming under increasing attack. In the last week, more than 160 people have been killed in Israeli strikes there. Israel says it only targets Hezbollah sites. Rescue workers with Lebanon's Civil Defense Force say a large number of civilians, including women and children, are being killed. Our correspondent Quentin Somerville reports, and a warning listeners might find some of the testimonies in his report disturbing.
Samir, what's going through your head when you're going to a strike?
Basically, I've calculated the situation in my head, focusing if there are victims, if there is a fire, if there was another airstrike.
Samir Ishki is 32 years old. For the last 14 years has been part of Lebanon's Civil Defence Force. He's the CDF's head of operations in Zahle, in the Bekaa Valley, in the east of the country. There's been an Israeli strike on an apartment block in El Karak, just minutes from the station. He's at the wheel of the ambulance on his way to the scene. So 2 buildings have been affected, but one has taken a direct hit and is partly collapsed at the bottom here. And we believe these are displaced people from the south of Lebanon who've been living here. The firemen are now closing down the site. This is a daily occurrence in this area, and the civil defence staff are telling us that when they arrive at the scene, there's half a dozen casualties that they're seeing every time. The smoke is getting pretty thick here. Even in 2006, the last war with Israel, there was nothing like the intensity of these bombardments. Meanwhile, Samir is deep in the rubble. There are survivors underneath the pancake floors of the apartment block. A fire is still blazing within, so when he finds a child, he doesn't have protective plastic gloves on. He can feel the shattered bones beneath his fingertips. As he carefully retrieves the child, he realizes it's only half a body, as he tells me afterwards.
First victim I found was a child. I don't know if it's a girl or a boy. It was a half child. Sorry to explain that, but it's from the stomach and up. From stomach and down, there is nothing. It's hard. It's too hard. We found 8 to 10-year-old girl, and she told us that her infant brother is next to her. And after that, we started hearing the screaming of a small child, a 7-8 month child. The hearing of that child crying, it gives you strength. You get stronger. We got in between the rocks and we passed and out to our paramedics.
Do you feel like a hero?
We're not heroes. We're doing our job. The victim who is still alive under the ground, he's the hero. This kid that we took out yesterday, he's the hero.
Samir says the strike left 6 dead, including 3 children. The boy Samir rescued, 8-month-old Mohammed Ramadan, is now recovering in Iraq. Israeli drones buzz overhead constantly. The contrails from its warplanes scour the bright blue sky above the Bekaa. At night, Hezbollah rockets could be heard on more than half a dozen occasions being launched from nearby. Spend more than 2 weeks with the CDF in the Bekaa, in tiny rural fire stations among fruit orchards and vineyards which carpet this fertile valley. The pattern of Israeli strikes and civilian casualties would be repeated again and again. Last Monday was one of the most intense bombardments on Baalbek, a city with a UNESCO-protected site of sprawling and magnificent Roman temples. With pickaxes and shovels, local men and boys dig through the ruins of another home. We're right by some of the Roman fortifications, and an entire house was wiped out here. Say 5 people were killed. The locals say that there's been a shift in the Israeli targeting, that they are increasingly targeting not military infrastructure, Hezbollah infrastructure,
Isn't this not making any
civilian
sense?
homes and apartments. So just here, among all this rubble,
After telling me to give me no trespassing clause, they give me this.
in fact, there's a destroyed car over here. He's 42 years old. He's lived here his entire life.
Huh?
This was built 100 years ago during the French Mandate.
I know.
No terrorist or bad person lived here.
We will go on the mission always fighting it, and we won't leave.
But this you have to tell me, don't stress that stuff.
120 Hezbollah targets that day. Some 2/3 of the 63 killed.
Well, it is if they're going to give them Medicaid.
Local officials. The wards of the local hospital are crowded with the injured. The cries you can hear in the background at Daramal Hospital, Children's Intensive Care Unit, are from 3-year-old Celine. She's lying in a hospital bed, she's covered in bandages. She has burns to her face. An Israeli airstrike hit her home, killing both her parents. She's crying for her mum and dad. 2 of her sisters were also killed. Her brother was killed. 5-year-old sister survived. She left the hospital. More than 2,700 people in Lebanon have been killed since the start of the war, but a quarter of them were women and children. In the next room is 2-year-old Kian. He was wounded in an Israeli airstrike. He's lying in a hospital bed. All he wants is his mum, Najat. She's by his bedside.
I'm crying because I'm afraid for my baby. If they think they can break us, they're mistaken. Even if I have to sacrifice my son, my husband, my father, my mother, my sister, and my son.
In the last month, Israel has unquestionably diminished Hezbollah's military might. The group's strength has deeper roots, and here in the Bekaa Valley, its bombing campaign and the high civilian toll is for now hardening, not weakening support for the group.
That was the BBC's Quentin Somerville reporting from the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. A new film, 5 years in the making, that documents the violence and brutality of Israel's occupation of the West Bank, has just won the 2nd annual Anna Politkovskaya Arman Soldin Prize. It was awarded to Israeli journalist Yuval Abraham and Palestinian journalist Basil Adra. The film is called No Other Land.
1,000 Palestinians face one of the single biggest expulsion decisions since the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories began in 1967.
مسافر يطلع هي المكان اللي كبرت فيه.
Well, the voice you heard at the end of that trailer, in a scene that shows a bulldozer destroying one of the homes in the West Bank village, is the voice of Basil Adra. He started documenting the actions of the Israeli army and police in his village at the age of 15. My colleague Julian Warwick spoke to both filmmakers, Basil Adra first.
They wanted to show to the world, they wanted to be the storyteller of my community and showing what's happening to our life, that we're living in this community, and they wanted to tell the people outside that we exist, we are living here, and look at the unjust that we are facing, in a way that we're requesting help from the world towards what we are facing.
So even early on, you had a wider audience in mind, did you?
Yes, always I wanted to reach more and more audience. I started using my social media to try on create an audience that they would see and know and care about what we are facing and what we are living in.
So Yuval, tell me about how the working relationship developed. How much mistrust was there between you at that point?
Me and Basil are the same age. We live under Israeli rule, but I'm under civilian law. And Basil is under military law. We're living under 2 different systems of law. I can come to Basil. Basil cannot come to me. He's locked in the occupied West Bank. And obviously it took time to build trust. And I think what brought us together is a sense of shared values. The fact that, yes, I'm Israeli, but I'm very much opposed to the occupation and to the policies that the Israeli government is currently doing, which is why I believe there needs to be sanctions on Israel.
Basil, tell me about your sentiments early on when you first met Yuval, and I think there's a moment in the film, isn't there, where he sort of eats with you and your family for the first time.
Generally, like Masafri Yadda community is used, and we in the community used to receive international and Israeli solidarity activists who would come and stay in our villages because they are coming in solidarity against and opposing the occupation, and for that the community hosts them. This is how I met Yuval.
Yuval, I wanted to ask you specifically, I mean, you've made your political view of this situation very clear. you would presumably acknowledge, at least now, that your viewpoint, an Israeli viewpoint, is a minority. And indeed, you've been attacked as being against Jewish people as a result of what you're doing. How do you respond to that?
First of all, you're absolutely right. I am a minority. I made a speech where I called for equality and very basic things that I believe, I believe in human rights. And it was labeled as even anti-Semitic by some German politicians.